Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Touhou Luna Nights. In the last part we technically finished off the game and fought the final boss against Flandre. With that said, we have another stage to do here. Like I mentioned last time, the final two stages in the main campaign were added when the game was fully released in February of 2019. But 4 months later in June they added this extra stage access to the White Shrine Gate over in stage 1. Which you don't need to play, but trust me, there's some really cool stuff here if you've liked what the game has had up to now. With that said, and we'll talk more about this in specific later on, the extra stage itself got its own update again later on at a notably later date that added something else to it, but we'll talk more about that in several minutes because we do take care of that this part. Almost immediately though, we do get introduced to this stage's main mechanic here, which is yin and yang symbols that you can jump into. Doing so will rotate them to a different state. What that state will actively affect is these walls that are blue and red. With one state, with the yin and yang symbol, the blue walls are down and the red ones are open, and then the opposite is true for the opposite rotation of the yin and yang symbol. And they do get pretty cheeky about placing this level's first secret immediately behind the first of those walls we see here. But thankfully it's just a gem cache. With that said, if you're going for a 100% map, you're gonna need to grab that. Worth noting as well, though, while this is a full stage and it does count for the map, it has no trash cans for its vending machines, even if the vending machines themselves are still present. But there are still pickups here. Mostly some gem caches, but there is another couple of things we're going to see along the way as well. We're going to see quite a few new enemies in here. We already saw some of them last time, like the cat and the fox spirit that disguises itself as sometimes some background object, sometimes a save phone even. There's also just outright little koi fish that don't stand much of a threat. There's tanukis that just try to charge at you and do some other attacks. But there are quite a few annoying enemies here, like the Raijin we saw a moment ago, I believe is what those are called, or at least a thunder deity of some sort, as they are the big tanky enemy for the area, and they do a lot of damage, even at my levels, and honestly even at higher levels. With that said, I do want to take a moment to talk about the boss rush mode I mentioned last time, I believe. The boss rush mode was added in the same update that added this stage, so in June of 2019. And it's every boss that was in the game as of that update. So, the main 5-stage bosses and the boss at the end of this. With that said, their stats are unchanged from when you first fought them. So when you go up against Mei Ling, you're probably going to be eating through her health pretty quickly because of the changed defenses. You do get ranked based on your performance in it. I think there's trophies for B, A, and S rank, or I guess achievements more accurately on the Steam release, but I think there's a PlayStation version of this that will give you trophies as well. I've at most maybe messed around with boss rush mode months myself, because while I like this game's bosses, fighting them in a row just isn't very appealing to me, but it's worth noting that they're all the same. With that said, going back to what's going on in the stage itself, my least favorite enemy in this stage is the one we saw a moment ago, which are the Koma Inu statues. Because the way their attack works is they pulse downwards and fire ups from both sides of them, and it follows the curvature of the land around them. On small platforms, that makes those platforms almost entirely unsafe, for one thing. But also, there's times where I swear the way it follows collision isn't one-to-one with how it should actually be, and it throws me off. It's one of those things you just kind of need to feel around and experience to understand what I fully mean, but there's something about it that's just not right, especially in rooms like this. So, last time I talked about this game being an early access and all that, and how they dropped the first stage, and the second and third in one update, then the fourth and fifth in another, and that's the full release date. I briefly mentioned last time that due to that, there were actively endings in the game prior to the ending we saw last time, as well as the, I guess you could say, secret ending we're going to get for clearing this extra stage. But those were largely just conversations of white text on a black screen between Remilia and Sakuya. I'll get into more detail about those momentarily, though, due to, well, this. Hey, human! Oh, Nitori. Are you here to give me a shop ticket? Shop ticket? What's that? What I have for you is information. Information? Turns out there's an intruder here in the chaotic space. An intruder? Are you sure it's not just Marissa coming here to borrow a book? Pretty sure that's not it, but it seems the intruder is going after Remilia. If they're after Lady Remilia, I certainly won't stand for it. Though why would they be after her? This world of Luna Nights was made by copying part of Gensokyo. Now that you mention it, Lady Remilia said something similar before. But now that someone's been messing with it, this unstable piece of space has appeared in Luna Nights. And it appears this instability is affecting Gensokyo as well. So that means Lady Remilia I think they're hoping to destroy Luna Knights by taking out Remelia. Well, that's no good. Defeating the Mistress now wouldn't solve anything. Exactly. The only way Luna Knights will return to normal is if Remelia wishes it so. If they try to destroy it by force, everyone will be trapped inside this world. Leave it to me. I'll stop this troublemaker. Better do it quickly, human. We're going as fast as we can. Gosh. So it's here where things can kind of deviate depending on what you want to do in this stage. Because now we have a new hazard. Fire barriers. They can be stopped by the walls that the yin and yang symbols move around. But touching them does a lot of damage. With that said, there is a way to get around them, but it's technically optional. The ones that are directly in your way in order to finish the stage, you can actively just damage boost through and take the hits. With that said, they still really hurt. You're either going to want to do that when you have as much health as possible, or at the very least, go buy some healing items from Nitori and use those. And that's actively the more worthwhile option at this point, because since you don't need to worry about not spending money anymore, you're going to be fine. Although I'll probably have mentioned this in call-out text in the post-script editing. Technically speaking, I think I actively may have been wrong about them one attack getting stronger or harder to dodge if you actively gave Flandre more gemstones. I think it's just the dialogue that might change, but I don't know. There's actually very little information about that specifically. I know I've read someone say she actively gets stronger at that attack, though. Also, I jump cut back here really quick, because in order to actively get past that screen we were on a moment ago, you do need to have it so that the red walls are open, and I always forget that when I come back to the stage, and that's actually a really painful backtrack, because the cats and everything here can drain your health really quickly. With that said, you do want to break left here no matter what, because A, there's an important item this way, and B, this is also where the first real full save and heal point is in the chaotic space here, and you're going to want as many of those as you can along the way because of how much damage you can take here at the levels we're at. With that said, as we move to the right, we're actively going to run into a room that actively had its purpose changed in an update I briefly foreshadowed a few moments ago. Specifically, prior to 2021, this room was rather different. What brings the ice fairy of the lake all the way here?
You're late, maid! How long were you planning on making me wait?
I'm late? Late for what?
Let me tell you, I'm here to fight you as a boss!
Let me guess, you've been talking to Lady Remelia?
Exactly right! She said if I take you out, I'll get myself a nice reward.
I hate to tell you this, but that game is over. This place is getting dangerously unstable. You should get out of here before the whole place collapses.
Oh, scared of me, are ya? I know you're weaker here.
No, listen.
I'm not gonna let you escape. I've been thinking up an ultimate move just for you. I'll show you a real game over.
Guess I have no choice. Just so you know, I'm not going to go easy on you. Of course, other fan favorite character Cirno is here. With that said, she wasn't in this stage when it first released. Like I mentioned last time, this stage was added to the game June of 2019. Cirno was added into this room a year and a half later in January of 2021. She was the last notable update the game actively got. Prior to her being in the game, what was in this room was a bunch of enemies, including one we haven't seen yet in this stage, alongside a notable pickup that allows you to get past the fire barriers much more safely. We're still going to get that item, but only after we beat Cirno here, so she's the game's only optional boss fight. First off, worth noting, some of her attacks, I think it's specifically one or two, can actively freeze you, leaving you open for more hits, so watch out for that. She's got an icicle wave she can spawn out of the ground that'll just kind of go for most of the room in front of her, but if you get behind her before she starts using that, you'll be safe. She's got a snowball she can spawn in that homes in on you for several seconds, and if that touches you, that specifically will freeze you. She's got an icicle she can spawn out of her that will then fall to the ground, but then track along the ground at a few different altitudes to try and hit you. But her big combo is what we've already seen her do. She'll do 3 distinct attacks in a row. She'll freeze the ceiling, causing large icicles to spawn in, which will then drop to the ground. Those can be used as platforms or destroyed outright, which can be helpful but also kind of deadly in some cases. She follows that up by sending out a lot of icicles directly out of her in the direction she's facing. You want to get behind her during this. But don't destroy every icicle from the prior attack, because her third attack in the combo is a giant icicle rain that can only be dodged by standing below one of the lingering large icicles. After that, the only thing left, I believe, is her pinch attack, which we're not going to see for a few minutes still. honestly, for being a boss added years after the game's release, I honestly think she might be one of my favorite bosses to fight in the game, which is tragic because if memory serves, she's also the only boss fight not present in the boss rush mode, as that only includes bosses that were present when the chaotic space was initially added, so the main 5-stage bosses and the boss at the end of the chaotic space. And honestly, not for nothing, from all the games from Team Ladybug I've played, even the ones I haven't finished, they're generally really good at making fun boss fights, which is a real good strength for me in a game because as a Mega Man fan, pattern recognition's built into my blood.
I'm not done yet.
Not bad at all. I wonder if Lady Remilion made you stronger. Cirno's pinch attack is to generate a gigantic icicle, which she'll fire in the direction she's facing, will home in on you from the opposite direction, then above you, then below you, before crashing on the floor and shattering. The rubble that it leaves can also damage you, so watch out for that. Yeah, in general, really strong boss fight. I do think that's one of the easier pinch attacks to dodge, but I think it helps that it's one of the shorter ones at the same time that's not just like Mei Ling's charge attack. Most of the other ones I'd say are best dodged with time slow or time stop period. That one you can also get around just completely fine as long as your reaction time's strong enough. I think the later you get into the fight, the more she does spawn in the icicle traps on the floor. But it also might be more of a thing of how close she is to the wall when she starts to use that attack. I'm honestly not too certain of that. One recommendation for a habit in this fight, though, is whenever she's doing the icicle rain attack, don't be too aggressive. Maybe throw a single chainsaw at her, as the potential to accidentally destroy your cover, leaving you open to fire, is a bit too great to be ignored. Otherwise, though, pretty chill boss fight. Pardon the pun. And thankfully, ultimately, compared to the boss we're coming up on and the boss in Stage 5, also pretty short.
Ah, damn it. You're not weak at all. No fair, I've been tricked.
Even if you've been tricked a little, I'm not going to lose to a fairy anytime soon. However, I must say you are definitely stronger than I thought. And considering you were chosen for this stage, Lady Remilion must consider you to be powerful as well.
Huh? I thought this was Stage 1.
So, you're only here because you got lost?
I was just looking for a place to build a castle.
Fine, if you say so. We'll just go with that. At any rate, I won, so hurry up and get out of here. It's dangerous.
Okay.
And for beating her, we get the Ice Magatama, which was here by default prior to her addition to the game. The Ice Magatama makes it so that when you get too close to one of the fire bars we've seen prior in the stage, there's just an orb of influence around you that just will negate the fire completely. You can never be touched by it directly again. But like I said earlier, if you have the stats for it via leveling up or just having some healing items on standby from Nitori, you can just damage boost through the fire bars that you need to get past to progress and ignore that completely. Would I recommend doing that? Not necessarily, but you can do it. So the main use of the Ice Magatama is in the room immediately after this one. In the upcoming vertical shaft, there's 2 fire bars directly above you, which you can damage boost through like I've said. But with the Ice Magatama, we can move beyond the normal way and actively get the movement utility for this stage, which, barring the required use of it to finish the chaotic space, is something I tend not to use. But if you wait as long as possible to do the item collection, it can honestly be pretty handy. Which is admittedly consistent with some other versions of this that even Castlevania itself has made and used over the years. The version of this in Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow, with how I tend to play those especially, comes to mind. This here is the dash spike. What this does is that if you double tap the D-pad left or right, Sakuya will do a much faster run. I think abilities like this are best served to place around mid-game rather than end-game, but with this game's stage-based structure, that's kind of unavoidable. With that said, going from 100% or not, you still do need to grab the dash spike specifically, as there's certain things we need to use that extra speed to get past in the coming sections. Now, worth noting, we see this specific enemy here that's like a little imp on an old-fashioned camera. They're a surprisingly annoying enemy despite them not actively doing damage to you. What happens is that if you get caught by the flash of their camera, Sakuya herself is subject to being time-stopped, no matter what's around you. Which means, if you're in a very crowded room with them, with high-damage enemies, you could be up a creek without a paddle, effectively. It can go real bad or real quickly with the amount of damage that can be done to you. With that said, something we're going to see moving forward in this stage is going to be the yin-yang symbol switches, but with the purple time aura applied to them, so you can actively activate them while time is stopped as well. So the puzzle becomes moving forward, what position do you need to have the switches in during time stop to actively progress through the room and get to the end of it? A moment ago, we saw the main usage of the dash spike, resisting underwater currents, as it's one of the few power-ups you can actively use underwater. We could do it over here to actually get this optional sub-weapon, the bound knife, which is, well, it's the gem from Castlevania Symphony of the Night pretty directly. It's a knife that bounces along the walls for a few seconds. Not for nothing, it's actively deceptively useful in boss fights. It also does a pretty good amount of damage, but it's also very easy to miss, as it's like a very locked away room compared to a lot of the other parts of the chaotic space. Now, the koi fish. I believe I already stated that they're not that big of a threat. They do have one attack that can maybe throw you off if you're just trying to rush and ignore things. Specifically, if there's some that are in little enclosed spaces with a surface of water they can jump out of, they will, and it is pretty fast, but honestly, due to how enclosed the koi are in a lot of the areas, the easiest way to take care of them is to just outright use the Lost Holy Sword, as it'll just neum over to them and completely destroy them without you even need to really think about it. That might drain your MP in some cases, but you're getting plenty of MP at this point, and if you are at this point anyway, you could just spend it in Nitori with no real consequence, outside of potentially losing the minor stat buffs, which, mind you, again, are very minor, but they can make the difference in some cases. Especially one specific gemstone. The Emerald in specific, which I don't even think we've found that many of across this LP. What they do is they actively give your HP a slow regen similar to your MP, and not for nothing, alongside the Gray system, that can really be a savior in some cases. Just good luck finding emeralds. I think, technically speaking, the earliest you can get them is getting the double jump in Stage 2 and backtracking to Stage 1 over by where the White Shrine Gate actually is, where they're an incredibly rare drop from the Frankenstein's monsters. Because that's the thing about a lot of the gemstones. They get to be really rare drops from certain enemies in earlier stages, and you could grind them out, but I honestly just don't think it's worth grinding them out in general outside of maybe an emerald, because the stat boosts are so minor that it's very easy to not notice them, outside of specifically the HP regen, because you don't have that natively. So if you played this game anything like I tend to, at this point in the stage, you're probably running pretty low on HP and MP from sub-weapon usage and just taking hits along this last section. And not for nothing, while I was recording this, I was actually very nervous. We are coming up on a restore point, but you really gotta be on point about using time stop and time slow to get around certain enemies in these very tight spaces. Especially the little fires that can ignore the time stop as they slowly track on you. One thing I find specifically very easy to do in this game, if only because of how I tend to play Metroidvania, specifically because of Metroid, especially Zero Mission, is that it's very easy to just kind of blitz through rooms and take a lot of hits, and take so many hits that your next vending machine is rooms upon rooms away. Thankfully, in this case, it was pretty close, but that's because I also knew where it was upcoming. On my first playthrough, I think I actively died in this latter half of the chaotic space like 6-7 times, and each time that happened was a several minute retread through level design to get to the next place. Let me just put it like this. The save point over by Cirno is the first save point since the start of the stage, and it's the only one until the very end of the stage. So that restore there is more just to keep your resources going than anything. With that said, there is a little bit of a way around that. We are slowly coming up on this stage's warp gate, and you can actively use that to warp to an earlier part of the game and just get a consistent save point going there, making this area a lot simpler to traverse. I believe I do this in the footage. What I would personally recommend is to use the save point at the start of Stage 3, as that's the closest one to a warp gate in the game. This here's the main place you're meant to use the dash spike. Slow down time, and then dash across it, and then maybe even slide under the door, and you're good. This dragon enemy here that moves in a similar way to the bone dragon enemies from Symphony of the Night is the enemy type that would actively be in the room with the Ice Magatama if you were playing the game prior to Cirno's edition. I believe it was them alongside some of the cats and Komainus specifically. I think at most I've only seen footage of the game be played like that, though, because by the time I first played the game, Cirno was already in this stage. And honestly, while I don't mind it too much, especially in this game's case because it was early access and it's a small dev team and all that, I do think that is kind of representative of one of this industry's larger issues nowadays, where if you're super excited to play a game, you're honestly better off waiting a month or two before picking it up. Not just for price drops in the case of console releases, because $70 is ridiculous in USD for a lot of games and what they offer, but patches and the quality of life changes that come out in those first 2 months can radically change a game's experience in a way where it's almost like playing 2 separate games in some cases. I myself haven't played this game yet, but I know Silent Hill F got a major one of those within the last week at the time of recording that just apparently makes that entire end game just so much more approachable, according to my partner. And in one regard, I'm bummed that that had to be the case, but at the same time, I'm like, hey, that means I'll have a smoother playthrough when I eventually get to that. And that's just kind of rough, in a way. Worth noting, upon playing along, if you just destroyed that emerald cache like I did and check your pause screen, you've now gotten everything in the item box on the top left. So you're effectively at 100% in all ways that aren't the map exploration in specific. And you're getting pretty close there as well, because we're actively coming up on the final stretch of rooms in the game. Also, minor recommendation. I'd actively recommend exploring the rest of this room first, and then actively going back to the warp gate to head back to stage 3's save point and restore point again, if only to lock in some extra experience for what's coming up. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 7, we're going to journey through the rest of the chaotic space, reaching the boss at the end of it in the process, thus ending off the LP. See you guys then.